This is the American Embassy in London. However, all is not well with international relations for America. Recently, US lawmakers have become increasingly concerned about a multi-billion-dollar gas deal between Russia and China. Some have even urged Washington to take action about the case. Senator John Hoeven has even encouraged his colleagues to pass legislation to increase gas exports from America. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for the creation of a new Asian organization for cooperation with the participation of Iran and Russia. Xi's call at a conference in Shanghai, China, invited Asian nations to work together on problems like transnational crime, cybersecurity, energy security, terrorism and natural disasters. The Chinese president warned the United States against building a military presence in Asia, saying, "To beef up military alliances targeted at a third party is not conducive to maintaining common security in the region." So are China and the Far East becoming less dependent on the United States? Is power shifting from west to east? And if this is happening, who stands to gain and who stands to lose? These are the simple questions we sought to answer, and we began by asking the public if they felt the United States should recognize that the world is becoming less dependent upon it. Here's what they said. US lawmakers have expressed concerns over a multi-billion-dollar gas deal between Russia and China, urging Washington to take action. Do you think that there's a rebalancing of the United States' world position at the moment? Do you feel that the Asian countries are trying to become less dependent on America?
I'd say that the power of the Asian economies and the Asian governments and the independence of their policy has been growing for maybe 20 or 30 years, and they're being led less by America. So I think the independence of China in particular is kind of exceedingly obvious now, and as such their policy will kind of move further and further away from the guidance of the US in future.
No, I think we want direction from the United States. It's a free democracy. China isn't, Russia isn't. So we want direction from the most powerful state in the world.
I don't think that they necessarily need to be involved with it, but if they want to become like a world power, if they want to get that kind of back to where they used to be, they kind of lost, I think, a little bit now. If they want to get back to that, then they're going to have to kind of trade and bargain and intervene with these, not necessarily intervene in a bad way, but intervene as in communicate and be a part of these deals, like between these major superpowers. Even though they're not necessarily not part of the world, they're not in Europe, they still have, I mean, Russia obviously has a lot of gas, China has a lot of industry, and a lot of actually, I mean, obviously a lot of our goods come from China now. So I think that they should get involved with it, but not too involved, where they're almost dependent on it. That's bad. But they need to be a part of it, I think, a little bit.
Various American politicians have got worried about very big deals going on between Russia and China, such as for gas, without America being involved. Do you think that America needs to begin to reassess its status as China grows on the global stage?
I would say they've probably started to do that a little bit. I know about Obama's pivot to Asia. That was one of his sort of main initiatives in the first 4 years in office. I think they should, and I think they have, and they should continue to do so, definitely.
So clearly,
how do you feel about that?
I think that America probably needs to, and that probably has for a long time, needed to reassess its position in the world anyway. I think that for a long time there's been a lot of indicators across the world, not just because of the growth of China, but because of the growth of or the inability of a superpower like America, in the absence of a superpower that used to be Russia, to do anything about the problems that would seem to be problems that global power would normally solve. So definitely.
So to what extent is it fair to expect America to recognize that its status on the global stage is changing? We turn to our experts for their point of view.
It is quite extraordinary, you know, when you think about it, that anybody else in the whole world should have, or think they have, the right to condemn a trade deal between two independent sovereign countries. Moreover, two major countries in the world. one of them a superpower and one of them coming back to being a superpower. Both of them permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. I mean, as interference in other people's affairs go, that sort of takes the biscuit. The very idea that anyone has the right to interfere with and threaten a trade deal freely signed by two countries in the world, never mind two very important ones, it really almost takes your breath away. The United States has to realize it is only one of many important powers in the world, that the world is becoming more multipolar, not less, and that it would actually be in the United States' own interest to stop interfering so much in other people's affairs.
Actually, the United States realizes very well, perhaps more than most, that the world is becoming less dependent on it. And they are proactively doing all that they can to ensure that the world stays dependent on the United States and the Western system, which is a global system. So what they're doing in recognizing that the world is becoming less dependent and strategically losing its relationship or removing its strategic relationship with the West, is that the West, and particularly Britain, France, and the United States, are trying to ensure by means of sanction, war, criminalization, and lies and deceit through their mainstream media, that the masses of the world are somehow convinced that freedom is actually tyranny and dictatorship, and that tyranny and dictatorship is freedom. So Libya post-2011 is freedom, a destroyed country. Afghanistan is free and democratic. Whereas China, which has seen 300 million people lifted out of abject poverty in 3 decades, unheard of in the history of humanity, is tyrannical and not in the interests of its people. So the United States is very well aware of vast regions and countries across the world delinking itself strategically from it.
So what will happen to the future status of the United States in global economics? We asked the public. If you had to guess what's going to happen to America's economic role in the future around the world, do you think it'll get bigger or smaller?
I'd say diminish somewhat, mainly because of the Asian growth is so great compared to that of the more developed countries. But it depends really on many factors.
I think America is going to be okay for the foreseeable future because of their gas reserves and their oil reserves. It looks like they're going to be stable. The problem is that they're obviously addicted to or dependent upon infinite growth. So I think inevitably that there'll be problems there down the line, but it doesn't seem to me like America's going to be in any trouble soon, until of course they run out of fossil fuels. So if they turn their attention to renewable energy, then who knows how well they could do. I mean, they're probably going to remain the most powerful country for hundreds of years to come, unless there's some kind of revolution.
What do you think will be the global economic status of America in the future? Do you think it'll change?
No idea. If I knew the answer to that, I'd be a billionaire.
I can see them having to give way to the Chinese. I can see that it won't be, not that there's been an American empire or a Chinese empire, but I can see the shift of power going towards China and away from America. Yes.
Is that a good thing?
I don't know. I'm quite used to the Americans. They've been the controlling power through my whole life, really. So I guess I'm a bit nervous about China as well.
So a range of views from the public on that one. What will happen to America in terms of its global economic status? We asked our experts if there were any key pointers to indicate the answer to that question.
Well, the United States will always be an important power. It has a vast territory, tremendous natural resources, fantastic human capital drawn from all over the world. It's quite a successful example of a multinational state, actually. And of course, its can-do spirit and its technical know-how, scientific know-how, is there and cannot be gainsaid. But its economic power, its brief period as a hyperpower is over, and it would do well to recognize that and deal with the many problems it still has within its own borders. Economic, social, cultural problems of children shooting each other in classrooms and murdering their teachers in significant numbers, problems of race relations within their country, and above all, problems of maldistribution of wealth within their country, where 1% of the people own almost all of the wealth in the country, and 99% of the people own hardly anything at all. Indeed, many of them are gravely indebted. So the United States is an important power, is an important economic power. It's no longer top dog and never will be again. Indeed, China will overtake it long before 2020, and it's already 2014.
What the future of the United States is in the globe in the foreseeable future in the next few decades, and as it is, the US is part of a Western global system of domination and neocolonialism and white supremacy. What will happen to it remains to be seen in accordance to the concrete developments that take place. More succinctly and accurately, it's in relation to if the global South can unite and develop its strategic capacity in defeating neocolonial hegemony and racism and war, etc. So really, those who will live through the next 1, 2, 3 decades will be witnessing themselves, and some of us will be actors, especially in the global South, of how the United States is going to survive or not, or how humanity is going to survive or not through this coming period.
The Chinese have called for a new Asian organization for cooperation with Iran and Russia, covering crime, security, terrorism, and natural disasters. Will that make them less dependent on America? We asked the public. Recently, China's been trying to organize with the countries around it to work with Iran and Russia on issues like security and terrorism and natural disasters. If they succeed, do you think that will make them less dependent on America and less American-facing?
It may well do. I mean, they may sort of, create regional trading blocks and that sort of thing. It's possible, but at the end of the day, they still need America to buy their goods and buy, in Iran's case, their oil. But yeah, there may be less dependence. They may make deals amongst themselves. For example, Iran and the oil is one example. If America and Europe put sanctions on Iran, there's always the option that those countries may create alternative markets that are as important as America.
No, I don't think necessarily. I honestly will in some aspects because I have a whole different coalition in their part of the world, but there's still so many other things that go on in the running of a country, just more than the just terrorism or crime like that. I don't think it'll really matter that much in the grand scheme of things. It'll definitely affect it a little bit, but it won't tilt anything, I don't think.
China's trying to get together with the other countries around it to form a kind of a grouping. If they succeed in doing that, do you think they'll be less dependent on America? Do you think it'll increase their status?
Yeah, I do. I do believe that, yes.
Yes, but I think China will grow stronger anyhow, so it's just a matter of time.
So to what extent would a pan-Asian organization covering these issues affect the status of America in that part of the world? Our experts had this to say.
Indeed, it's a very important new initiative by China, and I wish it very well indeed. I hope all the other countries join it. China has some problems with some of its Asian neighbors, some of them traditional, with Japan, for example, which invaded and raped and mass murdered millions of Chinese people in the lifetime of some people still alive today. But some new ones, which are more troubling, with Vietnam, for example, which has led to problems. And so, for all sorts of reasons, such a new Asian organization for cooperation and development would be a very good thing. I just add one thing to their agenda. You'll never be truly free of United States interference as long as you're using their currency as a reserve currency. China actually holds more dollars than the United States itself holds, and could actually destroy the dollar overnight by dumping them. But of course it would harm itself by so doing, and I'm not calling for that. But really these countries, big and important countries, like China, Russia, Iran, Brazil, South Africa, India, they should be looking to create another reserve currency. As long as the dollar is the main medium of exchange in transactions like oil, then the United States will have an unwarranted amount of power and influence.
China's leadership and initiative taking in trying to develop a common security and strategic pact with its Asian neighbors, particularly the Central Asian republics and Iran and Russia, really does free up the entire Asian people, which is a massive amount of people from Turkey all the way to Japan, from Siberia or all the way down to Australasia, arguably. It really frees up these people from the vice grip that it's seen itself in, especially post 1990-91, which was the unipolar moment for around a decade of the West. What it does, it frees up the Asian masses from the security arrangement with the West and NATO, which is against the interests of the Asian people, which has brought nothing but terrorism and conflict and war to Asia, particularly tragically to the people of Afghanistan. So really this is a very historic move that China has continued to develop this strategy, but there's nothing new because China is the leader of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which with the African Union, with ALBA in so-called Latin America, with CARICOM and non-aligned movement and other multilateral bodies of the global south really smashed that unipolar movement by the end of the 1990s.
So why is China urging Asian states to come together to unite on these common issues of concern? And if they do, who benefits and who loses? We ask the public. Why do you think China is urging Asian countries to unite, and if they succeed, who benefits and who loses from that?
That's a pretty complicated question.
We pretend it's a simple one.
I think the Asian economies and the Asian governments are still in a state of flux without the robust economic and political systems that we've experienced or that we've enjoyed in the US, in the UK, in Europe to some extent, and in Australia or Australasia. And I think until we have that consistency and uniformity of process and procedure and consistency of performance, then it's unlikely that a bloc in Asia is going to be meaningfully able to drive the agenda.
I've no idea what's motivating them, except they want the power that they see was always invested in the West. It might be good for everybody, but if I lived through the Cold War, and I'm rather nervous of Russia getting more power back, and especially the control over the gas supplies to Europe, that makes me rather nervous as well.
Well, China's trying to get this big organisation sorted out in Asia at the moment. If they achieve it, why do you think they're trying to do it? And who would be the winners? Who would be the losers?
Well, China, I suppose. And then the losers would be the European and American countries.
Why do you think that?
Because they're just more dominant than us. Well, they're not at the moment, but they will be with time to come.
I think it'll just strike more of a balance. At the moment, I think everything is massively outbalanced in favour of the West and Europe and America's interests. I think what's happening is a rebalancing of power and of positions, really. I think it makes sense when you're surrounded by Europe on one side and America on the other side to try and reassert some balance. Otherwise, they will be the mercy of the West and its demands and its policy. So I think what's happening is probably healthier than people make it out to be. I don't think there's any real threat to us. Really, I think it's probably more talk than anything else.
So what is the motivation behind China's invitation for its fellow Asian states to work together? And will there be winners and losers if they do? We asked our experts for their perspective.
Well, the United States has been very vocal and open about its military strategy in relation to Asia, with the quote-unquote pivot to Asia made very clear by the USA leading administration, and also actually even the consensus in Britain is the same in terms of the military containment strategy in relation to China. Now, the pivot to Asia is just that. It's not just a pivot to China, it's a pivot to actually encircle and bring under manners, in the interests of the West, the entire Asian region, particularly the East Asian region. So really it's incumbent in the interest of the Asian people for people to unite with China against this military strategy. Because if Asians do not unite together with the rest of the global south in defeating the so-called pivot to Asia, then we will only see a rerun of the trauma that we have seen historically with the Western powers. You look at Britain and Malaya, you look at United States and Australia and others in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in India, in China, all across the West has brought nothing but starvation, famine, division and war.
So we turn to the big question. In the view of the public, is power shifting from the countries of the West to the countries of the East? This is what they think. Putting all that together, do you think that there is a shift of power globally from West to East?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The Chinese are the most economically powerful. They're getting more powerful, and they want to be more powerful. So yeah, they are taking over in many ways.
Definitely.
You're quite certain about that?
Without question.
Do you think there is a shift of power from the West to the East, or do you think that's likely?
I think there is. Yeah, I think it seems, from what I've read the last few years, that seems to be the case. But I don't think it's a shift where they'll take over and the West will become weak. I just think it's a sort of gradual process. And yeah, I think it seems to be going that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think. Well, you read in the news every day that prospects, a bit better East, basically, yeah.
So, is power really shifting from West to East? We gave the last word to our experts.
They get up earlier, they work harder, and they are the future. And the best thing the West could do is come to terms with that in an amicable way and seek to offer the experience that we in the West have and some of the added value that we can bring to their economic enterprise and share the world fairly with no one country or any group of countries seeking to dominate the other.
Power is shifting from the West to the East, and actually if we look at the long history of what's happened, it's only a rearrangement to the natural order of things before the West dominated the planet, which came about around the 17th and 18th century, before which actually the power centers of the world were in the East. The biggest economies on the planet were India and China before the Portuguese and Spanish and the British and the French dominated the world by means of absolutely rapacious war and domination, defined by the genocide against women and the witch hunts in Europe, then the defeat and the genocide against the Jews and Muslims of Andalusia and the defeat of the Sultanate of Granada in 1491, and then the industrial enslavement of African people and the genocide and the wiping out of whole native populations across the world.
This new millennium has brought with it many changes. One of these is a major shift in national alliances from West to East. But this is just the beginning. How long it takes for America to recognize its less dominant role on the global stage is hard to predict. But whether America likes it or not, a new world order is taking shape, and that will change the global balance of power forever.